Yep, absolutely. And so there's two different handouts going around, you guys, and so one of those is really talking about the history of Colt Summit, and it gives information on what our proposed action and a modified proposed action, and then it also shows the timeline. I mean, we started, so real quick, part of what I want to talk about that's related to what Travis is saying is how long and why. I'm hoping she doesn't run in front of a logging truck. And so we started looking at this project. Jocko was 07, started looking at this in 08, and really because of that chunk of private land, because of fuels treatments that we'd already done along Highway 83 corridor, which if we had a WUI, the Community Fire Protection Map, once you leave Seeley Lake north of the ranger station, our WUI is a very narrow line along the highway where we've done a lot of treatment. We're fortunate around here that we don't have houses like way back in the, WUI, way off the beaten path and that sort of thing. So the WUI's pretty tight. We drove through that little chunk of private land back there, which on this map, which is a scale, like a map of the project area. So this map here, that little section and a quarter is private land. So that's, part of the impetus of this project is WUI. But as I said earlier this morning, very few things that we do on this district where we have grizzly bears and bull trout and lynx and loons on these lakes and bald eagles and all of the different values that we have and huge aesthetic values. I mean, we don't really do projects that are just aimed at one thing. We're trying to do, multiple objective restoration, and in that trying to not just talk about restoration from the vegetative standpoint, but from when we talk about watershed restoration, at least in my mind, we're talking about the trees and the critters and the fish and the soils and all of that, and that's a pretty high bar. Frankly, the bar's pretty high, and when you have bull trout and lynx and grizzly bears and rare plants and difficult soils and a lot of variability and a lot of awesome view sheds that people don't want holes punched in or whatever, the bar's pretty high. And so the bar on this project has been pretty high, but our collaborators have helped hugely, and I want to just bookmark that. And I know Marnie's going to talk more about the collaboration, but I mean, just the fact that collaboration exists here and people came in to back us up on why we're doing what we're doing was hugely beneficial. So that's kind of my quick intro, and I'm not, unless people have questions, I'm not going to right now at this time go into like huge detail on what all this unit map means and all of our different variable prescriptions. I want to talk a little bit about that second handout, which I didn't keep myself a copy. Oh, I guess there's, whoops. Okay, thanks. So actually, let's talk about this stuff on here. So there's a couple different maps here that are showing links points. And my background, you guys, I didn't say this earlier, but I used to work for the Rocky Mountain Research Station, and the way that I met Tim Love is doing lynx research in this area starting in the late 90s. So I worked for John Squires and Lynn Ruggiero and those guys and doing some of the early pioneering lynx research in this area. So we're super fortunate in this area that we have a huge amount of data on lynx, and these points represent both VHF locations from when we were flying and doing ground-based telemetry and GPS locations on lynx starting from like the late 90s up to about 2007 are these points. And so the maps are showing like a zoomed out view, and this is Placid Lake, this is Seeley Lake. So right in here is where we ate lunch, and then we're up here, this is the Colt Summit project area, and north of here you go on to the Flathead. So as you can see from all these red dots on this map, we've got lots of lynx in this area, and this is really, as far as like lynx in the lower 48, Seeley Lake represents about the southernmost extent of a non-reintroduced lynx population. Go ahead.
Lots?
And when I say lots, relative to other places that have like that many.
Right.
So,
like,
you know, I mean, that location, that,
per mile, something.
you know, there's like at any one time on this map right here, at any one time, maybe like 20 individuals. So lots is a relative term. No, each dot is a radio location or a GPS location, and the GPS collared links that was a point every hour. So suffice to say that this is a really important place for lynx, and where we're standing here. So if you look at this map, we're standing at the L on Summit Lake. So the highway going through there, and then there's Summit Lake right there, and again the yellow is the project area. So we're on the north central end of the project area. So I mean, quickly you're seeing where I'm going with this. Okay, you guys are proposing a project smack dab in the middle of some of the most important lynx habitat in the lower 48, not to mention that this is also a mapped grizzly bear linkage zone between the Missions and the Swan, and part of the Swan Valley Grizzly Bear Agreement. So you've got multiple endangered species, big, fuzzy, terrestrial, cute, lovable endangered species issues, all like coming to a head here that have very complex, you know, policy and procedural issues associated with them. And at the same time, you want to treat the WUI because this is high priority WUI. If I passed around that map that you looked at earlier of the historic fires, a big chunk of this area burnt in like 1917 or something like that, and so it was pretty heavy to just about a 100-year-old lodgepole. So lodgepole falling down, red needles. I mean, the area is like on any kind of fire severity map, it's like, you know, thin me, do something, and there's all these other issues as well. So what do you do? I mean, and this goes back to what Travis was saying, I mean, there's a cost of doing nothing. Do you say, what, you know, people are like, well, you know, what's the big deal? There's only 10 or so houses down there or whatever, you know, you guys will be okay or not. And, you know, we've got a fire plan that we had done treatments along the highway, and this was kind of the next logical place. So if you're Tim Love, are you just like, well, there's lynx up there, we're not going to do anything? Probably not, you know. But you also have Tim Love with me and my buddy Shane Hendrickson, the fisheries biologist, who are going, buddy, this is going to be kind of tough. You know, there's lynx and there's grizzlies and there's bull trout and, you know, there's cumulative effects issues and all these other different things. So how are we going to do this? And so for this project, just so you guys know, I mean, Tim being the great ranger and us being really fortunate that we have, you know, collaborative partners in the community and people from, you know, Wilderness Society and Connections and CRC and all these different groups, and good, strong support from FWP and other people, we proposed what seemed like a pretty good, you know, balanced project where you've got grizzlies, so you can't take the basal area down super low because you're worried about cover, and you've got lynx, and so you can't go into mature multi-storied forest because that's, you know, did I fail to mention that not only is this lynx habitat, this is critical lynx habitat, which was designated right around the time that we were starting this project. So we were the kind of the first one out of the chute to really test the policy about how you navigate through not only the Northern Rockies lynx management direction, but also the added layer of critical habitat, which is another ESA designation. So again, not to bore you with all the like minutia of that policy and everything, but to really talk about, you know, how this is hard and why it's important to not only have a line officer who's going, yeah, I hear you, we're not going to push the envelope here and then, you know, get it handed to us in the 11th hour. We know that we're probably going to get sued, and we want to be able to defend what we're doing. We want to be able to speak to our partners and others and say, yeah, we're concerned about forest ecology and lynx and other things, and to the homeowners. And yes, we're also concerned about your property, and we're concerned about fuels, and to the mill, where at that time, you know, diesel prices were over $4 a gallon, and you're looking for a fairly quick haul to the mill. And we have units proposed on both sides of the road here where you don't have to build new road. We have a road over on the, if you look at the map of this project, we have a road over on the west side of the project, this road right here. So about 5 miles of road right next to Colt Creek, which has West Slope Cutthroat, is a tributary to important bull trout streams, and actually have found lately that there are bull trout in Colt. And so we're taking out 5 miles of a road right next to a stream and relocating. So again, trying to hit all of these marks. And the bummer is that we still got sued, and then we went back to court, and we lost the second time over a technicality. And finally, you know, you see on this handout on that timeline, finally, after signing a decision on this project in March 2011, so I'm looking at this page, by April 2014, we finally made it through court and got the go-ahead to proceed. So project kind of started in 08, got a decision signed in 11, and got the thumbs up from the local judge that we did everything right to proceed in 2014, and now we'll see if we get appealed to the 9th. But we're moving forward. I don't know. I'm looking at Vince too and other Forest Service folks. Average to me, I mean, it seems like things are getting more and more complicated, not less. So I would say when I started here in 01, when I transitioned from research to forest system, it was probably less than that, because we would often get appealed but not litigated. With litigation, it just takes even longer. So that's enough said, I think, on my part. I mean, if people have, you know, questions about the wildlife issues or about the project, and if not, I mean, hopefully I want to give time to have a discussion here, but I'd like to turn it over to Marnie and Vince and kind of tie this. So does anybody have a question about
How are you mitigating full lengths?
how are we mitigating?
Full lengths.
So the policy essentially directs us to, we have a Northern Rockies Lynx Management Direction which amended our forest plans, and so the policy allows us to do treatments in areas like even age lodgepole, and the project mandates, it has standards that we don't do treatments in areas that are mature multi-storied wet forest. So this over here would be a dry mature multi-storied forest in this part of the world. So we avoid the high quality habitat, and we do treatments in. Yep. Arnie, anybody else have a question?
He's like, where do you want it? If I had known.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just real quick, I'm in my focal area. I mean, we're getting litigated. Many of the projects in the crowd are lynx issues. I mean, lynx is probably the #1 litigation issue in the region, and the entire crown. So the Flathead, Lincoln, Sealy, and the Swan. We're working across 3 national forests. All have lynx issues. Colt Summit. The 1 out of 11 or 12 issues we lost on 1 in court, that was cumulative effects and lynx, and we went back and redid things and we won. We set a lot of court precedent. So I think legally we learned a lot, and case law is unfortunately what determines a lot of how we decide what we're going to do and how we move forward. So from a legal case law standpoint, we learned a lot. The challenge is, do we, knowing that we're probably going to get sued on Glacier Loon and Cold Gym on the Flathead, and we have a big project proposed on Sealy called Center Horse, and some projects on Lincoln. Do we decide just to not go into lynx habitat, and then your window, your little, as my friend says, the hole in the middle of the saltine cracker that has a piece of salt in it got even smaller, you know. So I don't know if we've really decided that we're going to avoid lynx, but we've at least learned some things that may allow us to get through court easier.
How is the lynx used? You say it slows things up. What about it?
What about it?
Yeah, what about the lynx? I mean, could you give an example of...
Yeah, and again, I mean, it gets pretty complex, but you know, you've got issues on connectivity. So if you look over there, that's a unit, and there's trees that are painted blue. So people suggested that if you do this project and you open that forest up at all over there, you're going to impede the lynx ability to move across this highway.
Were these wildlife biologists saying this?
Pardon me?
Were these wildlife
No, there are
biologists?
litigants.
And what do they know about lynx?
Well, they can suggest whatever.
I think Marty's going to scale us back and say, what's the value of collaboration? How do we engage? Why do we engage? All that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and just to give those of you that aren't from around here a little history. So my name is Marnie Criley again, and I work part-time for a community-based organization north of us in the Swan Valley called Northwest Connections. Swan Ecosystem Center is also up there, who Roger works for. And I've also been involved in, I've been involved in several collaborative efforts in this general area. So there's lots of overlapping collaboratives around here, which can, I mean, I would say it's good and, well, it's not bad, but it can be confusing sometimes. So, you know, in the Swan Valley, you've had the Swan Forest Stewardship Committee that's been around for quite a while. I was engaged in an effort called the Montana Forest Restoration Committee that got started in 2007, and that kind of encompasses the Lolo and Bitterroot National Forests. And actually this Colt Summit project, when it was first being talked about in 2008, so that was, you know, it was before CFLR, the Lolo Restoration Committee was kind of the on-the-grounds collaborative that really came out, looked on the ground at the project with the Forest Service, kind of got in the weeds on the project. You know, I will say for our CFLR effort, you know, our monitoring committee gets pretty in the weeds, but our kind of broader Southwest Mountain Collaborative sort of depends on our monitoring committee and these more place-based collaboratives to be the in the weeds on the ground folks, more than kind of our broader committee. So, you know, we really depend on some of these place-based restoration collaboratives and committees to help us out when it comes to project level stuff. And yeah, so just, you know, Vince, one thing that you said about the Colville, and I've been thinking about it today, is I think maybe one difference we have here, especially when it comes to appeals and litigation, is that our appellants and litigators do not engage in collaboration. I mean, pretty much, we'll get them out on field trips occasionally, but they actually don't believe in collaboration as a way to get things done within the National Forest System. They are very NEPA-focused groups, and they think that is the way the public should participate in these efforts. So I think that's different from a few other efforts where, you know, sometimes you might have a group that engages in the collaboration and still decides that there's a point that they feel they need to appeal or litigate on. So yeah, what else? I mean, so why did I choose? I actually used to work for an environmental organization based in Missoula. It actually doesn't exist anymore. It's called Wildland CPR. And we focused on road restoration issues, so a little bit more of the other types of restoration, not the tree aspect. And I mean, I really enjoyed working for them, and I actually liked not focusing on trees, because I think the tree component is where there's so much complexity, so much disagreement. We did work on OHV issues, and that was a fun stuff. But you know, I got engaged in collaboration initially from the perspective of more of an environmental organization. I mean, Wildland CPR was not a litigating entity, but worked with groups that were. And when I got involved in collaboration, to me it seemed like the better route to take. Actually talking through issues, hearing each other out, I mean, I don't, what we hear a lot from the litigants is that people involved in collaboration, they give up their values. I don't feel like I've ever had to compromise my values being involved in a collaborative. We just are able to talk about issues, get out on the ground to talk about issues, hear each other out, and then try to come to some consensus. And, for me, I think, and part of the reason that we chose, the Southwest Crown chose to put 10% into monitoring is because we felt like that was actually the best way to sort of see how these treatments were going to work or not work. And so adaptive management, monitoring is kind of my comfort level with this. I don't mind testing things out on the ground, but I want us to take a look at them and see, okay, is this what we had in mind when we said yes to this design? And if not, let's figure out a way to do something different. So I've really appreciated having those conversations within this collaborative, and hopefully, I mean, the litigation has frustrated us in actually getting stuff on the ground, but I think we're making progress, and I'm hoping that the Colt Summit victory might help us move some things forward in the future. And we're also seeing appeals and litigation north of us in the Swan Valley, and it's the same groups. So it does get frustrating, but yeah, I just, to me, this is the best way to move forward. Yeah. Ooh. Well, I'm actually, you guys might have to help me out, but I actually, your question, I actually want to go back to when I was in the Montana Forest Restoration Committee, and kind of one of my favorite successes with that committee actually had nothing to do with an on-the-ground prescription, but we were working on a project kind of west of Missoula called South Fork of Fish. And the landowners there did not want the Forest Service to do anything. They were pretty, and it was interesting because apparently a lot of the landowners didn't get along with each other, and this project actually brought them together in opposition to the agency. But we as a collaborative felt like, one of the things we wanted to do was outreach to those landowners and encourage them to actually engage in the process and not just say, no, we don't like this. And so we got them out on field trips. We had a big dinner at one of their houses. And in the end, they did engage. They submitted comments about the way they wanted to see things happen. And the Forest Service took those pretty darn seriously. So they kind of realized they did have a say in the forests surrounding their homes and got some positive response out of it. Well, the landowners were concerned about how treatments were going to occur right up to their private property lines. And so what happened was the Forest Service sent out hand thinning crews to do a much more light on the land approach adjacent to their private properties so it didn't look so industrialized. They were very concerned about that, and huge slash piles they didn't want to see. And the Forest Service responded. And yeah, anyone else have successes or failures?
While this window's of opportunities open, I just want to mention on Colt Summit that we had, and which are Friends of the Court Reefs, and so when we were litigated, we had our partners, various NGOs, we had state agencies, Fish, Wildlife and Parks, Montana DNRC, county commissioners, 23 different, I don't know if yours was individual or it was through CRC or a little bit of both, which hat you had on. But anyway, and did that change the outcome in the court initially? No. But I think it was a huge victory in terms of the fact that the Forest Service wasn't standing alone, where we had a whole group of people, which to me is the whole, notion of collaboration. Are we satisfying 100% of the public? No, probably never will, but hopefully that amicus brief being filed showed that we were satisfying a large majority, and I know that was hugely a morale boost for us, and I think at the end it also helped us make it through.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands why collaboration is a new model. CFLRP to me is a laboratory that these different places, these 23 landscapes are experimenting with on how do you engage the public before NEPA, basically. And so rather than, I mean, the public has always had the opportunity, at least since 71 or whenever NEPA was passed, to engage in decision making, or at least weigh in. And I think, I guess just sort of like, why do we have this new collaborative model? Like, what was broken that sort of this emerged from? I mean, there's all kinds of, like, the social sciences about collaborative adaptive management, or adaptive co-management and those sorts of things, that it's just a good social process. You have, it's just better for society. It's better, you get better results from natural resource management when you engage lots of stakeholders. From kind of a process standpoint, I think it's front-loading NEPA so that NEPA goes more smoothly, so that you will get people's perspectives earlier on in the process.
And I think one of the things that we've hoped for, and I know, thinking back to Montana Forest Restoration Committee, was to try to reduce the number of alternatives, because with every alternative, the agency has to examine that alternative, and costs go up and up and up. Yeah. So if we could, as a collaborative, try to come up with maybe just one alternative, it would help with costs, it would help with getting it on the ground faster. And that Montana Forest Restoration Committee got started basically with a fellow from the Wilderness Society and a few other folks, timber mill fella, saying there has got to be a better way to do business than not having us come together until it gets ugly and nasty. And we should be talking early on, not late in the process. And yeah, I mean, I think it's been slow. I think collaboration and these efforts are slow, but I think we've built relationships and we've mended relationships that were poor. We still have some work to do, but we've engaged a broader sector of the community in these efforts. Particularly, on field trips, we really try to get community folks to come out. I mean, coming to our monthly meetings might bore them to death, but coming out in the field like this is a whole different experience. And
yeah, I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of time and resources. I mean, I know I live in Bozeman, and driving up here every week, I mean, my carbon footprint, oh my God. And so, and I think that goes on both sides. Both the stakeholders are engaging as well as the agency. I mean, it's a lot of work, and you could say, is it worth it? I think the tremendous value is that I mean, at least as a stakeholder, understanding the complexity of you can't just, when we talked about this earlier on, but like, you can't just sort of say, this is my issue and this is, I'm going to advocate for it. Like, it forces you to sort of, because you're sitting across the table from somebody and you're having coffee and you're talking about the football game, and like, you sort of like, oh my God, this is what these people are having to deal with. You have this, I don't know, it creates humility that this is a much more complex issue, and so it makes you a more broad thinker. And to me, that's a tremendous value, but it's a tremendous amount of work too. So sorry, Sharon, what were you going to say?
So this project's kind of taken 5 years to get.
There was real potential. So when we were doing the end briefing, we were looking at the column from Missoula going, oh, this is not a good thing. So we started the evacuation right from Missoula with sheriff's office right then to get this thing going. So that was what we were doing, and then ordering a Type 1 team right then.
You must have been dropping brands in your time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It really was. And
Did you have any ignition?
No, but it burned over the divide and burned fairly close to John's home, and they were dropping retardant right there to protect those houses, and doing protection, structural protection on those homes. But I'll tell you what. So here's something of interest to you guys, especially in fire management. This was, when the weather changed a little bit, a frontal flank control. So it looked like it was going to work. The weather forecast was such. So brought in heavy metal and started pinching that thing towards the front to squeeze it off.
Where was the line?
Yeah, they were doing that kind of work right in here. Right over. Yeah. So ordinarily you're anchoring and flanking, not this situation, more like this.
And what sort of fuel treatments, like?
Well,
kind of
that's a good question. Yeah. So we had done some of this, and this is where this is interesting. We had done these kind of treatments on this side of the lake, and the team thought the last stand for Sealy was to burn off from here. and you know, there's your Boy Scout road. It would have jumped over the west side bypass, the road just to the west of us, and it did. It spotted out there, and thank goodness caught that. Otherwise, it was back here wide enough. And so the team saw this work and thought, well, we need to do some more of that real quick. So they started doing some thinning like that, shaded fuel breaks along the west side bypass to prep that for burning off. So you can see where we put our energy to suppress this fire and what the fire did try to put around it.
Where are we located on that map right now?
We're sitting right here.
Oh, okay.
Our next stop is going to be up in the Berg area, so continue us up there and we'll get a better perspective on it. Okay.
What percentage of the fire burned at high severity?
Oh goodness, I have one of those maps. I should have brought it. I'd just be guessing right now.
Well, make up a good number.
Okay, it was high.
High.
It was pretty hard to the west of us.
More than half? That'd be high. It was more than half.
Yeah, it was more than
Most of that purple burned one day at high severity.
And what forest? Was that the same forest type as here?
Pretty much. There was a lot of cutover ground too. It was mixed ownership. Plum Creek, state, well, tribal initially, then state, Plum Creek, and Forest Service. And in fact, what's the breakdown here? 18,000 was Plum Creek, 2,500 acres was state, nearly 12,000 of Forest Service, 33,000 of tribal, and then a mix of private, a small mix of private.
Page 10 in these handouts shows the burn severity down here in the bottom. So if you look for the Jocko Lakes fire map, there's the severity.
Were we right, Corey? Over 50?
I don't have the numbers, but
Unfortunately, the MTBS data actually has those bands in it. If you work with that, it's got these bands. So it's one of those years where your data comes through for that reason.
I think suffice to say, very, very little of it was low severity. It was either moderate to high.
Yep. Particularly in day one.
Do you know if there are a lot of fuel treatments that have gone on privately around the City Lake area?